I think I think we're ready. Howdy, everyone. I think we're ready. Okay. So, howdy, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to the Money Store. My name is AJ. Let's dive right in today. I'd like to discuss the interesting fact that Naason Joaquin Garcia has had lawyers for the past 2 years, ever since he was arrested. I want to discuss the peculiarities of Naason having lawyers, Naason's history with lawyers, the hypocrisy of a person like him having lawyers, the lawyer's relationship to the rest of the church and how that has changed, and and other related topics. I got a big script ahead of me because I just had a lot to write and share, and I hope this is useful for you all. As always, your engagement is helpful to this channel. I encourage you all to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Doing any of these is free, and they help in convincing YouTube's know-it-all algorithm that the content on here is appreciated and legitimate. So let us begin. Let's start with the timeline. Naason Joaquin Garcia was first arrested on Monday, June 3rd, 2019, and the rest of the church did not hear an announcement about his arrest until the very next day, June 4th, a Tuesday. On that day, on June 4th, there was a transmission to all church members where the Bishop's Council announced quickly that Naason was arrested and that they were all to pray for his release. I should take quickly out because they took a whole day to announce this, but their message was quick for sure. They said, yeah, Naason was arrested and that we were all to pray for his release. While the bishops were definitely not clear about why Naason was arrested, the bishops were very clear in ordering members to not read the news at all. They were very clear in establishing that the bishops were to be the only fountain of information to all of LLDM's members. And in the following days of early June, church members learned that Naason was being represented by a pair of lawyers that did not pertain to the church at all. They were not members. Kenneth Rosenfeld and Allen Sawyer entered the picture and were participating in press conferences and whatnot for the church, in addition to representing Naason in the courtroom in those early weeks and days. These two guys were open not only to defending Naason in the courtroom, but also out in public, as they knew that the arrest was causing major strife and doubt within church members and between the church and the communities that it is present in. The main defense coming out of the mouths of Rosenfeld and Sawyer back in this day was that this was a hit job. This was all a hit job, a conspiracy, and therefore the whole arrest was illegitimate. These lawyers made it a point to say that they believed Naason was a very, very special man who could not have done what he was accused of and arrested for. You know, they get private time to speak to him and learn about him and whatnot. And, you know, while they obviously didn't buy into the whole doctrine around Naason, they cited their interactions with Naason as convincing them that, yeah, this man is very special. He's not at all who the prosecutors claim he is, etc. So just like other higher ups and spokespeople of the church, Rosenfeld and Sawyer were quick to repeat the exaggerated claims that the church has 5 million members and that Naason was noble, humble, an honorable man, innocent, and regardless of what the state of California has to say. Of course, viewers of this channel's first video will know that the church absolutely does not have 5 million members at all. But I bring that point up because the lawyers were obviously being paid to have some sort of public speaking role, and they were very quick and unquestioning in their adoption of these sort of talking points that a lot of people were putting out back in the day, that the church was not shrinking at all because of Naason's arrest, that the church actually has 5 million members and it just keeps growing and keeps growing. It's all crap. I do want us to remember just how public these two lawyers were in the summer of 2019, because that same sort of publicity changes when other lawyers start representing Naason. For example, Rosenfeld and Sawyer would speak at several press conferences outside of the East Los Angeles church and would even speak directly to media outlets like the Law and Crime Network with Brian Ross. We'll get to this later, but the lawyers representing Naason right now don't do these things at all. We'll explain in a bit. One instance that comes to mind is the video that Berea Internacional posted on their YouTube channel on July 4th, 2019, Berea International. This is the sort of media hub outlet of La Luz del Mundo. It's a sort of publishing house. It's also a sort of media outlet for the church. It's basically the sort of side business for the church. So there's a video that Berea Internacional has on their YouTube channel that was posted on July 4th, 2019. This was still during the days that the initial bail hearings were happening. At the time, Naason's bail was at one point $25 million, then $50 million. But then by mid-July, Judge David Fields would determine that Naason was to be held indefinitely with no chance at bail. In that video I mentioned July 4th, so before like the no bail is established, in that video on July 4th, Sawyer and Rosenfeld are sitting near the lobby of a church. I believe it's East LA. They're speaking to Bibiana Ochoa, the interviewer. Curiously, the comments are turned off for that video, and even though Sawyer and Rosenfeld haven't represented Naason for the past 24 months, this video is still posted to Vera Internacional's channel for some reason. I wonder why. When watching the public speaking that these lawyers gave back in their day, one can see how these lawyers are very clear about how they do not believe in the church's doctrine. They don't believe that Naason is a man who can speak directly to God and holds the keys to salvation and all that junk. They would say that Naason was a special man, honorable and impeccable in his character. You know, they've gotten to meet him very intimately after all. But again, they were not buying into the whole doctrine around Naason and that all of LLDM is established upon. That was the rapport that these lawyers had with the church. And this is the relationship they had with Naason. They were to admit that they did not believe in the church's doctrine, but that they would still say endless positive things about him in public, and that they would say endless negative things about the prosecutors. This is a tangent, but I want to mention it here. I recall in the early days of Naason's arrest that at least some church members were instructed to invite at least some church locations were instructed to invite their members to write letters to the judges. I remember helping a number of older church members write out letters that someone was going to collect and then send to the lawyers so that they can then collect this big, massive amounts of testimonies and have that be some sort of proof that Naason is honorable, widely beloved, so on, and that like people just can't believe that he is being accused of certain things, of these, of the charges that he's being accused of. It was a weird move because any informed person knows that such a big body of written testimonies like that wouldn't do anything in the court of law. In hindsight, I view that exercise and that sort of early development in Naason's arrest as just a way of getting members to write down their commitments to Naason. And then, of course, I was invited to help people write this stuff so that I could have some sort of investment in Naason getting out of this scot-free. But me personally, I helped these people write their things, and I just wanted to see what people were writing. And yeah, obviously, I don't buy into any of the crap. In fact, I view it as this sort of like practice that, again, yeah, I'm going to say this again, but like I view that as some sort of practice that was implemented in certain church locations. So just to make people sort of rally around Naason, just one sort of way to force them to rally around him. So as the summer of 2019 went on, these men would run out of things to say in the favor of Naason. In August 2019, it was revealed in a court document that Rosenfeld and Sawyer were trying to have a certain charge dropped. The charge had to do with Jane Doe 5 and the accusation that Naason had raped this person. For the record, Jane Doe 5 is not a minor. This person is an adult. In the court documents, in the documents that the lawyers submitted to the court, these lawyers admitted that, yeah, Naason did have an extramarital affair with Jane Doe 5, but that while Naason had a sexual relationship to this person, he did not rape them, and therefore the charge should be dropped. These lawyers know that adultery is not a crime in the U.S., thankfully. These lawyers know that, but rape is. And so the argument became that Naason was simply an adulterer and not a rapist. What was interesting about this point in the timeline is that Rosenfeld and Sawyer, as attorneys, intimately examined the case as they knew it, gathered a lot of evidence, did all their interviews and whatnot, and yet still felt the pressure to admit to Naason being an adulterer. Keep in mind that Naason is paying them for their services and Naason has an image to hold up. But instead here we have an admission from the defense, the people that know Naason very intimately and know this case very intimately, at least at that point. But here we have an admission from the defense that the narrative being pushed out in public and to the church's members was not the same narrative being expounded upon in the courtroom. While LLDM asserted on and on that Naason was honorable and innocent, had from outside of the courtroom, the lawyers that actually knew the state of the case knew that they had to give this concession to the prosecutors within the courtroom. They admitted that Naason had some sort of alone time, privacy, etc., what have you, with Jane Doe 5, and that as a result of that, they had some sort of sexual relationship. This was one of the most important moments in the case against Naason so far. I have heard several folks cite this development to be the moment that started to help them break out of La Luz del Mundo and the information bubble that La Luz del Mundo tries to keep them in. It is also a development that hasn't undeveloped since it came about. Naason's lawyers after Rosenfeld and Sawyer still uphold the argument that Naason did not rape Jane Doe 5, but did have an extramarital relationship with her. So within the people inside church that learned about this concession in court about Naason, we're quick to sort of dismiss it and say that, no, this is just a strategy by the lawyers to help get Naason out of trouble. But one asks, is it okay for this most perfect, honorable, and innocent man to allow lawyers to lie for him in court just so he can get out of trouble? Wouldn't that be perjury? A crime. And because Naason in the past had made it a point that church members should not only pray for the well-being of him and his ministry and the church and all that, but that they should also pray for the authorities of the world, the governments of the world. Naason would do this quite often. Naason would say that we must respect them and their rule because they were put there by God after all. But then suddenly, when we found out that the same man was paying lawyers to lie for him so he can, to the authorities, so he can get out of serious trouble, what do we do with this information? Again, this moment was a real breaking point for a lot of people. The man was either an adulterer, and the man either raped this person or didn't rape this person and did have a sexual relationship with them, and that's not a crime, or the man did not rape and did not have a sexual relationship with this person and still allowed his lawyers to lie for him in the court just so he could get out of trouble. It was a dead end either way for La Luz del Mundo when it came to that particular point. But let's continue with the timeline. After that whole revelation in August 2019, we learned by the end of the month that Rosenfeld and Sawyer were no longer representing Naason. Naason now had a new set of lawyers headed by Alan Jackson. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm quite certain that the church did not make an announcement about this change at all. And I think everyone should know that Alan Jackson was the man who was hired by Kevin Spacey to help him in his own Me Too scandal. I believe that started in late 2017 when the whole Me Too movement was kicking into high gear. Alan Jackson has represented Naason ever since then. So basically for the past 2 years, the past 2-ish years, we're almost at the week when he comes into play. The defense has managed to prolong the court proceedings ever since then. Their biggest win was back in April 2020. The defense managed to have Naason's charges dismissed because of a technical mistake, failure, oversight, etc., what have you, by the judge, George Lomelí. Keep in mind, this is a mistake from the judge and not from the prosecutors, not from the executive branch. This was a technical mistake from the judicial branch of the government. Lomelí had failed to schedule some sort of court date with the right timing. And so Naason's defense seized upon that and succeeded in buying more time. But that is all that really happened. The defense bought time and didn't exactly have Naason released as everyone had been hoping and praying for nearly a year at that point. So instead, what happened was that the prosecutors just refiled charges against Naason, more charges, in fact. They upped them. They kept him in custody. Naason never even got to step out of jail, even temporarily. Again, this win right here was just a matter of just buying time. When this development was happening, the church wasn't at all clear about what was occurring. Instead, what happened was that certain spokespeople like Allen Garcia were trying to convince church members that their precious apostle was going to be released very soon. It was just a matter of time. There was a lot of hype at this time, and it was as a result of this being a technical development that people in the church weren't doing their research into why this happened at all. Instead, this minor technical development was molded to fit the narrative that was already set by the church, a narrative that was deliberately dogmatic and dismissive of any challenge to it. So then, of course, more charges are slapped right back onto Naason, and the prosecutors have to start again from square one. Fine, it's fair. From late July 2020 and up to mid-August 2020, there was another set of powerful and moving bail hearings for Naason, just another set of hearings back at square one. Testimonies were given by a number of police officers about what the Jane and John Does had described to them had happened, and about what was seen on the electronic devices that Naason owned and that were incriminating him. There are plenty of articles, detailed articles from Isaías Alvarado of Univision on this particular set of bail hearings, and they differ from the first set of bail hearings from the summer of 2019. And so I encourage you all to go check that out. Isaías Alvarado has a ton of just wonderful content and has been an immensely useful journalist throughout this whole ordeal. Additionally, you should all be aware of my good friend Virginia Beckett's YouTube channel, and she has those videos posted there too. I highly encourage you all to subscribe to Virginia's channel and view her content. Much, if not all of it, has a translation into Spanish and vice versa. And she's just a wonderful friend of the channel and incredibly useful and helpful in the world of YouTube. So at the end of those bail hearings, it was determined that Naason's new bail was going to be $90 million. Again, the man was capable of achieving the highest bail ever set in Los Angeles. And that is quite a statement because Los Angeles is the literal incarceration capital of the planet. Since August 2020, there have been a number of other general court hearings, preliminary hearings, and so on. As of today's recording, the trial against Naason is set to start on September 27th. This has been a date that has been set and in place for several months, I think going back to April or May. I'm hopeful that the trial does start then and that we are no longer have to endure any more postponements, but we'll see what happens as time goes on. So that is how I want to narrate this timeline of Naason's criminal case and how the lawyers have been involved throughout it all, different lawyers. Now, I want to make a number of points here about the reality that Naason even has lawyers to begin with. I'll discuss why it is odd that Naason has lawyers despite who he claims to be, and I'll also discuss how having non-LLDM lawyers undermines LLDM's message of autoconsumo. So let us first talk about the interesting fact that Naason even has lawyers to begin with. The church thinks that Naason is a servant of God, an apostle of Jesus Christ here on earth. Jesus back in the day had apostles, and then he and they eventually die. But LLDM believes that it took God around 2,000 years to then decide that he was going to start having apostles again on earth. The first apostle of this new modern era was Naason's grandfather, and then eventually Naason came to power in late 2014. These apostles, these men, are thought of as being impeccable in character, having a direct line to God and Jesus up in the heavens. They are the most precious and important people to have walked the earth this past century and for the past several millennia. They have the keys to heaven, figuratively speaking, and they are the ones that are going to be in charge of turning in loyal, believing church members into the hands of God whenever the end times come. This is what the church believes about these men. There are countless ways of describing what LLDM members believe about their leaders, but it all essentially boils down to that. Then, of course, there are all the superpowers that people have attributed to these men over the years. So with this view of the modern day apostles, it is understandable why there were certain mantras coming from LLDM members ever since the start of Naason's arrest. Ever since the start of Naason's arrest, the mantras have been consistently that the man is innocent, honorable, God will testify, pronto saldrá, he will come out soon, etc. And so the question becomes, if Naason really is the magical person that he says he is, and that his followers believe he is, wouldn't he be the person most capable of not having lawyers on earth representing him in this case? Why hire lawyers at all? Let me remind viewers that defendants do not need to hire a lawyer to help them get through whatever legal process. A defendant can represent themselves and walk their way through the legal process if they choose. Or the defendant can have a court-appointed lawyer, or the defendant can have the court provide them with a lawyer. But we aren't talking about any ordinary person here, according to LLDM. We are talking about the supposed apostle. If anyone walking this earth is the most capable of handling the situation, isn't it him? I mean, isn't God on his side after all? I mean, I believe at some point I even heard La Luz del Mundo members say that God was the actual lawyer of Naason, and that sort of makes sense, but in practice in the courtroom it doesn't. LLDM members can rant and rave on and on and on and on and on about how Naason is innocent, honorable, and that God is ultimately his lawyer. But where has the God of LLDM been throughout this whole ordeal? The God of LLDM has yet to open the roof of the courtroom to manifest himself and get his precious apostle released. According to church history, LLDM was founded when God opened the roof of Eusebio Joaquin's house at night and told him that he had some grand mission for him. Why can't the God of LLDM just do that now? When Naason came to power in late 2014, he made it clear that he was now the one ordained by God to lead this church, and that God told him directly that the church was going to grow unimaginably. Well, wouldn't this be the perfect time for God to just manifest himself and make it known that he has Naason's back and that the California prosecutors were all wrong and evil and are the instruments of Satan, and it should be them instead that should go to jail. And then after that, they should go to hell. Like, I mean, like, La Luz del Mundo has a lot of attention on it at this very moment. And wouldn't this be the perfect moment and the perfect way to shut up all of LLDM's critics, myself included, of course, and put LLDM back on the path of growth that God supposedly promised them? You know, this channel, I would just end this channel immediately if Naason would just, you know, demonstrate his magic powers. But it is the case that has not happened yet. I'm trying to point out how there is all this hype around Naason, and yet he has nothing to show for it at all. I now want to talk about autoconsumo and how Naason's hiring of non-La Luz del Mundo lawyers has thrown that cultural feature of LLDM out of the window. Just in case some of you don't know, LLDM, especially in recent years, has had a culture of autoconsumo between its members. I'm not too sure when exactly this started, but I know that for sure in the past handful of 5 years or something like that, this has been something that's been trying to that ministers have tried to encourage within people. Autoconsumo basically means self-consumption. That's the way it's translated. Members are encouraged to engage in economic activities with one another when possible and try to minimize their economic activities with people outside of the church. For example, many church locations are bound to have a member that is a mechanic or a member that can tutor, you know, young kids. And so church members are encouraged to seek out the goods and services of other members so that the money that members have can stay within the hands of other members, you know, as much as possible. This encourages community between members and allows for some members to even give each other like nice discounts because they know that the people that are their clients are actually also people that are members of the same church as them. They hold the same foundational beliefs. Another point that is given for autoconsumo is that members can use their money to hire other members in the church, and they can have a peace of mind knowing that their fellow member isn't going to spend that money on alcohol or pornography or whatever. The culture of autoconsumo basically encourages members to try to keep their money within the hands of other church members whenever possible. This is easier in some locations than in others, of course. And this is all meant to This is all supposed to foster some sort of community within the church and support the church's overall economic foundation. But then, of course, Naason is arrested, and he has several lawyers represent him that do not go to LLDM. I'm quite certain Ken Rosenfeld, Allen Sawyer, and Alan Jackson, et cetera, had not even heard of LLDM to begin with until Naason's, you know, deep pockets came knocking on their doors. LLDM definitely has its fair share of lawyers within it. I'm pretty sure. Perhaps none of them are capable of handling criminal cases in California, maybe, but that's beside the point. One asks how it is possible for Naason to rant on and on about autoconsumo, but when it comes to facing his criminal case, he not only throws in the towel that, well, I guess God's not going to represent me in this case. He's not going to manifest himself and get me out. You know, he's my lawyer ultimately. So sort of when one speaks about the dogmatism ultimately, but I'm also going to throw in the towel and just not hire LLDM people. I'm going to hire non-LLDM people. Okay. Instead, he hires extremely expensive lawyers that do not even believe in the LLDM doctrine at all. These people have admitted clearly that they do not believe in all the dogmatism surrounding Naason. The optics don't look too good here for LLDM. Wouldn't it be, you know, grander and more respectable if an LLDM person were the one representing Naason throughout this whole ordeal? Wouldn't that be a blessing for that one particular person? But no, that is not the case. Instead, Naason's deep pockets hire lawyers that have histories of defending wealthy clients in the face of horrific charges brought against them. Also, one more point about the autoconsumo, this autoconsumo bit. Don't church members have some sort of like cognitive dissonance within themselves about the fact that they are one way or another paying for these lawyers to help defend the man of God? And, you know, while that money goes over there, those people are going to, you know, Allen Sawyer and Ken Rosenfeld are going to use that money to, you know, go buy expensive suits and whatever other things they do, you know, maybe some vices. Not to speak badly about them, but like, wouldn't this cause some sort of like cognitive dissonance within members? Apparently not. It is tragic to think about all this. Naason is the leader of a cult that has managed to convince the members to give him and his family immense amounts of money and assets. Then, when he is arrested, the church is ordered to not inform themselves of the case's reality and continue to give money to Naason, to the organization, which then goes into the lawyer's hands, which then goes into litigation and prolonging the case and postponing it and so on. That same money that lines up Naason's deep pockets is the same money being used right now to hire non-LLDM lawyers. That same money is what is behind Sawyer and Rosenfeld having to resort to the strategy of admitting that Naason is an adulterer and not at all, and that he is not at all the magical monk, guru, man of God that he says he is. It is tragic to think that members just continue to not inform themselves or even question how the church is misleading and outright lying to them. Members are fed a certain narrative, then give their money to the organization. Then the organization is hypocritical by hiring lawyers that then further contribute to the obscurantism around the case. This is the twisted cycle that this whole ordeal has been on for the past 26 months. But one way or another, the end will come. You know, for the past 6 months, to put it very crudely, LLDM has been pissing on the legs of its members and then telling its members that it's raining. I think that is all I have to say today. I hope you guys find this rant useful for yourselves and your efforts to get other people out of LLDM. Let me know what you think down below. Is there anything you'd like to add about the lawyer's involvement in this case? Was the August 2019 development the one that helped you break out of LLDM? What do you think LLDM's members think about the lawyers these days? Comment your thoughts and answers down below. As always, your engagement is appreciated. Liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing this video are all ways that you can support the channel. Doing any of these is free, and you can always change your mind later. Take good care, everyone. We're in solidarity.